For the road, songs as we travel the journey of life. They're highway songs, if you will, and that's the title of my series, Songs for the Journey of Life. And I started off last week by talking about songs, and this week about cymbals, because those two things both have very special places in our lives. Music does, cymbals do, because they're all around us, and they define, in a way, who we are as people in the world that we live in. So last week we started with our study in highway songs. That's the sermon series title. And we talked about leaving the world. That was our title from Psalm 120. Psalm 121 that we're going to talk about tonight has a totally different feel to it. This is a psalm about trust. And so I've entitled it Learning to Trust. And before we dig into the psalm, I want to go back and I want to do a little bit of review to catch people up on what's going on in this particular set of psalms. Music, like I said last week, has always been a very important part of our lives. I said that earlier in the sermon. Never so much has that been true than of the people of God throughout history. It's been those that have put their faith in God that have ensured that music has continued even down to this day. Many ancient hymns of Israel and Judah, many ancient hymns of the church, ancient hymns that are 1,000 or more years old still appear in our hymnals. Some hymns that are 500 years old, you know them well because they've been preserved down through time. Why? Because music is important, like cymbals are important. Music and cymbals give us a way to be able to worship God and to give expression to life experiences. And for the Jews, when we're talking about the Bible, songs were very important. As a matter of fact, they were so important that they put together a book when it came to their Bible, what we call the Old Testament. Songs were so important that they put together 150 of them, and it's called the Book of Psalms. And within that book of Psalms, or songs, there are divisions. As I said last week, there are 5 books within that one large book of Psalms. And then within the Psalms themselves and within the books, there are various types of Psalms as well. Sometimes there are subsets or groups of Psalms, and the Psalms of Ascents, which we will be speaking about tonight and over the next several weeks, not next week because it's Mother's Day. So the Psalms of Ascents are a series of 15 psalms. And those are the psalms that we're going to be talking about. Now, if you were to look in your Bible, you would see a superscription, a little like title underneath each chapter of the psalm. And in these 15 psalms, you would see that it would read, a song of ascents. A song of going up, as in going up to Jerusalem to worship the Lord. These songs became very important in the history of the Jewish people after the Babylonian captivity. You've heard of Daniel, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, and all of those folks from the book of Daniel. After that captivity, there was a king that came along. His name was Cyrus. And Cyrus let the Jewish people who'd been taken captivity many years earlier into Babylon, he let them go home to Jerusalem, to their homeland. All of them that wanted to go, they were able to go home. And Ezra, who was a scribe, he was an expert in the Scriptures. He would copy the Scriptures. He would study the Scriptures. He would teach the Scriptures. He is the forefather of the Pharisees that we read about in the New Testament. Ezra, the scribe, describes his journey from Babylon back to Jerusalem as an ascent. He went back from a place of captivity to the place where he could meet with God. Remember I said that you always go up when you go to Jerusalem? it is of a high elevation. And from anywhere around the circumference of the city and beyond, when you look to Jerusalem and when you can see the city, you're always going up. So you have this picture of ascending to the place where you can meet God. And so Ezra first describes his trip from Babylon back to Jerusalem as an ascent. That whole theme kind of caught on. Early in the Bible, in the book of Deuteronomy, God gave instruction to the Israelites, who later became the Jewish people. A portion of the Israelites became the Jewish people. God gave them instructions every year, especially the men, to go up to Jerusalem 3 times a year to celebrate Passover, the Feast of Passover, the Feast of Pentecost, and the Feast of Tabernacles. One feast in the spring, one in the late spring or early summer, and one in the fall. That was a commandment for all men, all Jewish men, and if they could, they would take their families. It was an expensive trip. All men were commanded to go up to Jerusalem to worship at these feast times. And so, as a part of their traveling, they would find things to do, like you would. You have traditions, perhaps, that have developed, or maybe they're long since passed, but within your family, you developed traditions when you went on vacation, things that you did. When these folks were making the pilgrimage to Jerusalem, one of the things that they did was they began to sing. They began to sing songs. And these are the 15 songs, the Psalms of Ascent, that they would sing on the way to Jerusalem to go up to feast time. And they would always travel as groups. They would come to a common road, and the group would grow, and the excitement would grow as they would get closer to Jerusalem, singing these songs about how God had delivered them, how God was taking them to the place where He could meet them, how their life would be different because they were the people of God. And so within the context of that 150 songs or psalms, we have this subset of songs that people would sing on the journey up to Jerusalem. Now there's another tradition that developed around this idea of these 15 songs, and that was that either the people or the Levites, who were of the priestly tribe and they worked in the temple, either the people or the Levites, once they arrived at the city for the feast time, they would ascend 15 steps, the 15 steps of the second temple, the one that was built after Solomon's temple was destroyed. They would ascend 15 steps from the court of women, where the general populace and the women could go in the temple. They would go up 15 steps to the court of men, where all the Israelite men could go to be closer to the holy place and ultimately closer to the Holy of Holies, which is where the presence of God dwelt. They would sing these songs on each one of those 15 steps. You see, there's 15 songs, and there's 15 steps. And so when the pilgrims would begin to arrive at the city, either the people or maybe the people and the Levites would all come up to the first step. And all together they would begin to sing Psalm 120. When they finished that song, that group would go to the second step, and the group behind them would go to the first step. And the people on the second step would sing Psalm 120 simultaneously with the people singing Psalm 121 let me back up. Let me get this right. Second step, Psalm 121. First step, Psalm 120. You get the picture, right? Okay. So eventually, by the time you got to the top of the 15th step, right, all of these psalms were being sung in praise of God and in praise of Him bringing all of the pilgrims there all at the same time. And so it was a wonderful picture of worship, not chaos, but worship to God, because everybody knew what was happening. And they were all telling about their own particular pilgrimage to the city as they ascended to the place where they could meet with their God. And with each step, by the way, too, things might get a little bit more difficult. So as we go through these psalms, you're going to see that each psalm might demand a little bit more of us as we get closer to God. I started out this series by saying that the premise of the entire series was to show the commonality of man and the sufficiency of God. In other words, It doesn't matter if you lived a long time ago in another place or you live here and now. There are some things that are common to all men. We all have struggles, we all have strife, we all have difficulty, and we all have a need to know God. Whether we realize that or not, it's true. That's what we reach out for as human beings. Someone or something greater than ourselves. We know that person as God because that's the reality. He's God. People search. They spend their entire life searching for something. That something is God. That's the blessing of the church. We get to tell people what you're looking for is God. That's what man has in common. And because man has that in common, that natural desire to seek for God, God says, I'm going to show up on the scene and I'm going to be everything that you need if you'll only give me a chance. And so we have this promise in Scripture. If you draw on a pilgrimage, as it were, to Jerusalem, if you draw near to God, He'll draw near to you. If you make a move towards God, He'll make a move towards you. And when you finally arrive at your destination, it's going to be more glorious than you could ever imagine. Every fear will dissipate. Every heartache will be put aside for the glory and the joy of knowing and seeing God. And that's what these pilgrims were experiencing on the road. The more they sang the songs, the more excited with anticipation they got as they got closer to Jerusalem. And that's my purpose of the entire series, that we would all get closer to God. Why? Because we're all on a journey that we call life. We're all going from where we are now to somewhere, someday. And we're here tonight to talk about how to navigate that journey, how to get to where that God wants you to be so that He can meet with you. And it started out last week with leaving the world, talking about this person that was vexed by all of the struggle of the world. I'm a man of peace, he says, but everywhere I turn, people are for war. I can't find any amount of peace. All they want to do is stab me in the back and hurt me and harm me. There's got to be something better. I know what it is. I'll begin to trust more in God, and I'll begin to move in His direction. That's where Psalm 121 picks up. The pilgrim is perhaps leaving home, and he would begin to sing this song. He's already sang the song, things are bad here, I need to go where things are better. And now he begins to sing this psalm that I've entitled Learning to Trust, Psalm 121. And it's a dialogue, this psalm is. It's an antiphonal psalm. It's a song that requires some kind of response on the part other than the individual who initiates the song. That's why I had you read back to me portions of this song, because that's how it would have been on the road. When the psalmist would have recited or sung the first two verses, either internally to himself or with the rest of the group, they would sing this song. And so he would ask the question, I lift my eyes to the hills. Where does my strength come from? My strength comes from the Lord. And then the whole group would answer him back. Or he would be saying this in his head and in his heart, and he would answer himself back the remainder of the song. You see how it works. And as he would do that, he would find that he is indeed drawing closer to God with every step that he takes. And it starts out with fear almost and trepidation, but it doesn't take very long to find out, or for the traveler to realize, that the Lord's power is before him. The Lord's power is before him. It speaks of God's sovereign power. God goes before us. And so he says in verse 1, I lift up my eyes to the hills, or to the mountains, more exacting. The word is har, H-A-R in Hebrew. And it's used actually to describe a pregnant woman. And it means mountain. It doesn't mean hill. There's another Hebrew word for that. It means mountain. But it's symbolic. Because as the pilgrim begins on his journey, he raises his eyes and he looks to the hills. partly in fear and partly in anticipation. Fear because he knows he has a long way to go, and he doesn't know what the journey is going to hold for him or bring his way. In the hills or in the mountains, there are robbers, there are wild beasts, there is all kinds of danger. There are the heights that you could slip from and fall. At the same time, he's torn in his emotions because that's where he needs to be. He just doesn't know how he's going to get there. Where will his help come from? And so he asks himself that question as he looks to the hills. Where is my help going to come from? How am I going to get there? And then he answers to himself, my help comes from the Lord. He's the maker of heaven and earth. Where does my help come from? That word help is very interesting. Again, in Hebrew, it comes from the word etzer. It means military aid to somebody who can't help themselves. It's also a word that's used of a woman. Way back in Genesis, God created man and said, it's not good that man should be alone, so I'm going to make him a helper, an etzer. Somebody who's going to come alongside him and make him whole and fight his battles if necessary. That's what the psalmist is saying. I need somebody to come alongside, somebody who is stronger than me to fight my battles. And sometimes, listen, if you get a woman mad, the husband doesn't have to say anything. She can say it all, baby. You know what I mean. You just hope that it's not directed at you. Sick 'em. You know what I'm saying? That's where this word originates. That's where it comes from. And most often, though, in the Old Testament, it's used of God. He is the military might that's able to come alongside and help you in your time of terror. Help you when you can't help yourself. Where does my help come from? My help comes from the maker of heaven and earth. I don't have to be afraid of the mountains with all of their symbolic danger, with all of their symbolic majesty on the other side, because mountains are awesome. Have you ever seen a mountain? How awesome they are. I can remember when I was 14 years old. And my brother Jim is in service tonight. He's sitting right in front of me, man. Yeah, he was 11, and we took a trip to California. And my grandmother was with us. And I don't know, maybe my mom and my grandma thought maybe we were never going to get back out to California again. They wanted to stop everywhere. So it took us 6 days to get there because we did stop almost everywhere. But one of the things that I remember that was the most outstanding about that trip was the mountains. You know, you can go down south and you can see the hills of Kentucky or the Smoky Mountains, but you go out and see the Rockies, and there are some more grand than the Rockies. You go out and see the Rockies, now that is impressive. And you see that and say, this is incredible. There has to be, who made these? Where did these come from? Were they simply glaciers that, moved down from the last ice age like we learned about in science, which, by the way, when I was in 8th grade, they said the next ice age is coming. Now science is saying everything's heating up. You tell me. I don't know. I think they're confused. Where did those mountains come from? We stopped at the Grand Canyon. It didn't look like the Flintstones when we saw it. But one of the things that really stood out, honestly, was the mountains. I was absolutely taken by the mountains as a young person. I still, to this day, remember a night that we stayed in a hotel, and of course, with Jim and myself, my brother and myself, we always had to stop somewhere where there was a swimming pool because we were just going to swim. We don't care where you stop. We don't care what the room looks like. Just make sure they have a pool so that we can go swimming. And we stopped one night at some hotel somewhere, and there was a mountain right by that hotel. And I remember coming out in the morning. I have no clue where we were. And I saw that mountain, and I said, man, that's awesome. And still to this day, sometimes when I see the clouds, especially in the evening, I remember that mountain scene. It had such a great impression in my mind. It was a symbol of something that I wasn't used to. I didn't know, I didn't understand, but it spoke of something that was greater than myself. And so I have to ask myself, when I view things like mountains, who made those mountains? Yeah, maybe God used glaciers, but where did the glaciers come from? Well, they came from frozen water. Where did the water come from? They came from God. That's the only logical explanation. He's the maker, the psalmist declares, of heaven and earth. He made those mountains, and He can be my help to get from where I am to where I need to be, to my destination, to Jerusalem, to worship God. I don't have to fear. And so he encourages himself. I look to the hills. Where does my strength come from? My strength comes from the Lord. How do I know He's going to be there? He's the maker of heaven and earth. He made those mountains that I'm afraid of. He must be able to take care of me on the journey. And so here's the psalmist already closer to God than when he started. At first he questions. Now his level of trust, his level of certainty deepens. And if that's not enough, all of those in the congregation will recite, sing back to him even more encouraging words. If he's by himself, he does it himself. But if he's with the group, and as the trip goes on, and more people join, if someone starts this song out, everybody else in the whole caravan sings it back to him in encouragement. And they talk first about God's providence and the fact that God's providence is with the pilgrim. That God's providence is with me. That's His divine protection. It pictures God as a shepherd watching over His flock with vigilant care. Look what the words say. Verse 3. Remember, He's viewed the mountains. And now the song says, and the singers say, He will not let your foot slip. You won't stagger. You don't have to be shaken. You don't have to worry. No matter what height you're at, you're not going to fall. God's hand will be there to protect you. He will not let your foot slip. He who watches over you will not slumber. He doesn't even get tired, even after a big meal. You know, sometimes I talk about this Bible study that a couple of us go to here. Dave, my friend Dave goes here. Tom goes to this Bible study every Tuesday. And I'm one of the pups there. I'm 51. There's maybe two people younger than me. One of them is 51, but I'm just a couple months older than he is. Everybody else is like in their 60s, 70s, and 80s. And we always have a meal to start out the Bible study. And sometimes we watch a video, which all of the guys love. You know why? They fall asleep. They're like, boy, this was a good meal. Do we have a video today to watch? Because it's so enticing. But the psalmist says, no, God doesn't even slumber. He doesn't even doze off, even for a moment. It speaks of His vigilant eye that's on our every step. He pays attention to our every detail. You know, as you start getting a little, sleepy-eyed, things begin to slip by you. You're not as sharp. You're not as quick. You don't see things the same way. The psalmist is declaring God doesn't slumber. He is never found in that state. As a matter of fact, verse 4 says, indeed, or it is true. Indeed, or it is true. He who watches over Israel, he who keeps guard over Israel, will neither slumber nor sleep. Which is really interesting because the pagan peoples allowed their gods to take naps and to sleep. But the God of Israel, He never slept. Remember Elijah when he came into confrontation with the prophets of Baal earlier in the story of the Old Testament? And he sets up his altar and they set up their altar, and they're getting ready to have a contest to see who the real God is. And when the prophets of Baal and Ashtaroth, depending on which account you're reading, when these prophets of false gods begin to call down fire to set their altar ablaze, when they begin to call down fire from their God, nothing happens. They're cutting themselves, they're singing, they're dancing, they're carrying on, and nothing happens. And Elijah, the prophet of Yahweh, the prophet of God, he begins to make snide remarks. And he says, maybe your God is taking a nap. This is in the Bible. Maybe your God is off somewhere relieving himself. I mean, it says it right there in the Scripture. Why? Because the pagans allowed their gods to do that. But this is not so with the God of Israel. He is always vigilant to watch over his people, so you never have to worry. As a matter of fact, you never have to lose sleep because he's always awake and he's always watching over you. I wish I could say that I never lose sleep. Oftentimes, anxiety in life's journey causes me to lose sleep, and I bet it's done the same to you. You wonder about the future. You don't know. God holds the future in his hand, and he says, listen, the psalmist says, and the song singers sing, God doesn't sleep. He doesn't slumber. He pays attention to every little detail of your life, and he never misses a thing. There's nothing too large. There's nothing too small that escapes his attention, and anything that comes into your life is there for a reason, and God has it all under control, and our struggle is that we don't. Our struggle is we want to control everything, and that brings anxiety because it's not too long before we realize that we really can't, if we're honest with ourselves. In all of our trying, we really can't control all that much in our lives. God never sleeps. He never slumbers. He's always watching out for us, and he's in control of everything that may come into our lives as we go on that journey, as we take that highway, that trip to Jerusalem, to our destination. That's going to mess up the video. So the song goes on. And the song singer, the initial song singer, finds out that the Lord's presence is also beside him. Listen to these words as the singers sing back to him. The Lord watches over you. The Lord is your shade at your right hand. The Lord guards. The Lord watches over you. He protects you. They're reminding him, no matter where you are, he's there to watch over. There's no place that you can go where he's not at already. He's watching over you. As a matter of fact, the Lord is your shade at your right hand. In other words, if you're a traveler and you're traveling during the day in the ancient Near East, or even today in the ancient Near East, the heat of the sun is incredible. And it will beat you down and wear you out and cause you to dehydrate and all kinds of physical infirmity to come upon you because you're absolutely worn out. But that's okay because he's your shield from the sun. As a matter of fact, he's at your right hand. He stands at the place of your strength and your skill. In other words, when you can't do it yourself, he's right there to do it for you. He's the one that's skillful. He's really the one that's strong. And when the sun is beating down on you, let's take that as a symbol. When the sun is beating down on you and you can't stand the heat, you have to know that God is the one who's there to take the heat for you so you can rest at ease. You don't have to do it on your own. He's there for you. As a matter of fact, he's at your right hand. He's that close. He's beside you. Verse 6 says, the sun will not harm you by day, nor the moon by night. You won't have to worry about sunstroke during the day, physical infirmity, or by night. You don't have to worry about lunacy. That's associated in ancient cultures, even today. Come on, if we're real. There's some crazy ideas that the moon brings out the worst in people. They say it's good to go fishing on a full moon, I think, if I remember right. Haven't been fishing in a long time. Werewolves come out. Who knows? Maybe some vampires too that get confused and think they're werewolves. I don't know. Strange things happen during full moons, they say. Tides change. Ancient people who would be paying a lot of attention to nature and to their environment around them, unlike we ourselves, would notice that strange things happened when the moon was out. And there was this great fear that was perpetuated that you might go crazy at night, that you might be tormented in your mind, not physical torment, but mental and emotional torment. In the cool of the night, you could go crazy. And so as you're traveling and you're going from this incredible heat during the day to this incredible coldness of the night, you don't have to worry. God is right there. He's protecting you. You don't have to worry about heat stroke or moon stroke because God is there. Physically, mentally, emotionally, God will look out for the traveler if you're heading towards Him, if you're drawing near to Him. And that brings me to the last little strophe. That's a portion of this text here. The Lord's protection, the traveler finds out, is around him. The Lord's protection is actually around us. Look what it says in closing. The Lord will keep you from all harm. Nothing is excluded. Nothing can harm you unless God allows it, and God will keep the traveler. The person who's heading towards Him, God will keep him from all harm. He will watch over your life over against death. He will make sure that you reach your destination. He doesn't promise you a perfect life without trouble. But He does promise that He'll watch over your life when you're going through trouble, that He'll make sure that you get to your destination. If we go with the earlier metaphor or symbol of a shepherd, we can see that from the shepherd psalm, Psalm 23. The Lord is my shepherd. I shall not be in want. It goes on to say that even though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil because you are with me. And your rod and your staff, they comfort me. As a matter of fact, you prepare a table before me in the presence of my enemies. In other words, my enemies are all around. And you give me a meal to partake of, and they can't touch me because you're there protecting me and guarding me. I never run out of food. As a matter of fact, my cup runs over. You give me more than I need. Your blessings are superfluous. I don't possibly need or deserve all the blessings that God gives me, but when I'm in your presence, they're all mine. And goodness and mercy will follow me all the days of my life. It will follow me with the intent to overtake my life. God's mercy and grace. When I desire to dwell in the house of the Lord forever, when I make a move towards God, He moves towards me. And those are my promises. He will watch over my life and keep me from death. Verse 8 then ends the song. The Lord will watch over your coming and your going. Doesn't matter. Like here, the pilgrim is heading to Jerusalem, but he's going to have to go home. He's going to watch over you here and now, no matter where you are on the journey. He's with you because you could sing this song anytime on the journey. And He's there and He's watching over you. He's going to watch over your coming and your going, every aspect of your life. When? Both now, like right now, and forevermore. I love that word forevermore here. It means throughout the remoteness of time in perpetuity. Throughout the remoteness of time in perpetuity. In other words, there is never a time when the Lord is not protecting you and His presence is near you. As a matter of fact, I want to say this just as a matter of record. If you're moving towards God, you can be sure that this is the case. But I could also make the case that even if you're just flirting with the idea of following God, He's going to come alongside you. And I can also make the case that even if I'm running from God, He can be there too. And I can testify to that because that's what I did for like the first 25 years of my life. Not understanding, not knowing. And when I look back, and you, if you would pause for a moment, you've thought of it already. If you would look back over your life, you could see how God had protected you, how God had guarded you and been with you. And you should come to this conclusion here and now. There is no reason for me not to completely trust in God. There is no reason for me as a traveler to not have complete confidence in God. He is the maker of heaven and earth. He watches me day and night. He knows my every step. He'll keep my foot from slipping. I know that now I can shift my attention away from my own autonomy, away from control over my own life on life's journey. And I can shift it to God in full trust, knowing that He cares for me. 1 Peter says this, that I can cast all of my cares on Him because He cares for me. And I can know that without a doubt. He's ever before me. He's always with me. He's promised to take care of me to the remoteness of all time in perpetuity, forever. It's perpetual. God never quits looking out for me, and He never quits looking out for you. And as the psalmist begins on his journey, he takes great comfort in knowing that although he doesn't know what he's going to encounter along the way, that he can trust God to take care of him every step of the journey. In closing, let me simply offer 3 areas of practical advice. Number 1, at the beginning of every new journey, it should cause me to focus on the Lord and the good news of His love and His care. Every day, we don't know what it holds, but every day is a new step in the journey in the rest of your life. And we should wake up every morning like it's a new journey. A journey from here, not to Jerusalem necessarily, but a journey to the New Jerusalem. That place where heaven and earth meet in the future, where God dwells with His people. And all together, God's church sing these songs. We should practice by waking up every morning and saying, I look to the hills. Where does my strength come from? My strength comes from the Lord. I don't know, this is going to be a terrible day, but I know that I can find strength in God. He is always with me, and He's made me that promise, and so I don't have to worry or be anxious or lose sleep because God is with me. It's a practice for the future, and perhaps one of the greatest experiences that we can have in practice for singing in the New Jerusalem in that time in the end is when we all come together and sing and worship God. That's number 1. Number 2, practical thought or idea. We face the journey of life's best when we are in a community of faith that encourages us by reminding us of the good news of God's love and care. That's the psalm. When the psalmist was distressed, all of those in the congregation of pilgrims, they encouraged him. Where does my help come from? Listen, buddy, your help comes from the Lord. He's the maker of heaven and earth. He can take care of you, and He promises to do that. And this is my final thought. Let's go ahead and stand. This is my final thought. This psalm reflects the beginning of the journey, but it doesn't tell the whole story. It tells of the good times on the journey. But you remember, right before the psalmist took the first step on the journey, last week, Psalm 120, things weren't so rosy. He was troubled. He was lamenting in his own mind, in his own heart, because of his present situation. And as soon as he began on the journey, he found encouragement on his way to the Lord. But he only gets a couple of miles down the road, and he begins to sing Psalm 130, which opens up like this, also a psalm of ascent. Out of the depths I cry to you, O Lord. Hear my voice. Let your ears be attentive to my voice, the voice of my supplications. In other words, I'm calling out to you, God, because I'm in distress here and I need your help. You see, God doesn't whitewash our lives. He doesn't promise us the easy way. Like we said earlier, He does promise to be with us every step of the way, and that's the whole story. So when difficulties come, when I look at my friend Tom and know what he's been through, and Mary Lou over the last few weeks, I know that he knows that God is with him. When I look at my friend Dave, and his wife Shirley, and we don't know his whole story yet. When I look at them, I know that they have to know that God was with them, but there were times of great, great distress. Those times served to strengthen their faith. As I look around the room, I know that you have faced the same things. And instead of destroying us with God's help, it should give us a greater confidence, a greater trust in Him. But it's a learning process. It's not something that comes natural. So those hard times have to come so that we can learn to trust Him. That's my charge to you this week. Let's take a look at our circumstances. Let's remember that God is in control and He's watching out for you. And the things that I can't control, I'm going to entrust to Him. And you'll be one step closer to your destination if you'll do that. Rob, lead us. I want to leave you with these words. This is the priestly blessing, the priestly blessing. The Lord said these words to Moses, "Tell Aaron, the high priest, and his sons, this is how you are to bless the Israelites, the people of God. Say to them, and I say to you, the Lord bless you and keep you. The Lord make His face to shine upon you and be gracious to you. The Lord turn His face toward you and give you peace. So they will put my name on the Israelites and I will bless them." And that's what I've just done. There's power in a blessing. As your pastor, that's your blessing. May the Lord bless and keep you. May He make His face to shine upon you. May He always be watching over you every step you take. And may you learn to trust Him. Amen? Amen.